Everyone, how are all of you doing? Teacher Janet here. In this video, we'll discuss subtopic 10.3 of the Form 4 KSSM Biology syllabus entitled The Mechanism of Heartbeat. The amazing heart is a dynamic, hardworking organ that works non-stop throughout life, managing to squeeze in only about 0.4 seconds of relaxation or rest for every heartbeat, which lasts about 0.8 seconds. So the average heart is only the size of an adult fist, but it pumps about 7,000 liters of blood every day. So a healthy heart has an efficient electrical system consisting of the SINOATRIAL node in the right atrium and other tissues which control the rhythm or beating of the heart. The contractions of the atria and ventricles are very well coordinated to ensure that blood is pumped smoothly to all parts of the body to deliver nutrients and oxygen to the cells which need it. Let us find out more about the wonderful pacemaker called the SINOATRIAL node and the systematic cardiac cycle. The learning standards for today's lesson are as follows. 10.3 Mechanism of Heartbeat. Number 1, after this lesson, we should be able to describe the human heartbeat mechanism, which involves the SINOATRIAL node that's called the pacemaker, atrioventricular node, bundle of His and Purkinje fibres. Number 2, we should be able to communicate about the forces that cause the blood to circulate in humans. These forces are produced through the pumping of the heart or the contraction of cardiac muscles, and secondly, through the contraction of skeletal muscles. Here's an overview of what we will be discussing in this video. 10.3 Mechanism of Heartbeat. Forces that cause blood to circulate in the body. The first force is the pumping action of the heart or the contraction of the cardiac muscles in the heart. And the second one is the contraction of skeletal muscles around the veins, for example, in the leg. Now, for number 1, pumping of the heart, we are going to discuss firstly the characteristics of cardiac muscles, how are they adapted for their function. So they are connected to each other and they are myogenic. Now, secondly, what is the cardiac cycle? So in the cardiac cycle, there's the relaxation of the cardiac muscles, relaxation of atria and ventricles, followed by the contraction of atria, and then the contraction of ventricles, okay, according to the acronym RAV, R-A-V. Next, we are going to discuss the reason or the cause for the contraction of the atria and the ventricles. What causes the contraction of the atria and ventricles? So this is the human heartbeat mechanism, or the mechanism of heartbeat. So it involves 4 tissues, the SINOATRIAL node, atrioventricular node, bundle of His and Purkinje fibres. And there's an acronym for this, which we'll discuss later. So the LUB DUB sound of the heartbeat, how does it happen? What causes it? We'll find out. And after that, we'll discuss the artificial pacemaker, which is a small device implanted into the chest region of those who have a slow heartbeat, slower than normal heartbeat or irregular heartbeat. We'll find out more about this in the last part of this section. And then going on to contraction of skeletal muscles around veins, we're going to discuss the role of the skeletal muscles in the movement of blood in the veins back to the heart. And then how are the valves in the veins damaged? And how does varicose vein occur? 10.3. The mechanism of heartbeat. Blood circulation in humans. What are the two main forces that help blood to be circulated in the human body? So the two main forces that enable blood to be circulated in the human body are forces generated by 1. The pumping action of the heart, okay, in the blood circulatory system, and this involves the contraction of the cardiac muscles in the heart. Secondly, the contraction of the skeletal muscles that press on the veins in various parts of the body, for example, in the legs. So we're going to discuss these two different forces, and we'll start with the pumping action of the heart. Now, the first force that enables blood to be circulated in the body is the pumping action of the heart. So the heart is made up of cardiac muscles, right? Now, what's the function of the heart? The general function. The heart acts as a pump by contracting its cardiac muscles to pump blood to the whole body. So the heart is made up of cardiac muscles. And what are the adaptations of the cardiac muscles? Now, the first adaptation is that they intersect and are connected with one another or connected to one another. You can see these structures here that act like bridges, right? To connect the muscle fibers in the cardiac muscle tissue. So the advantage of this arrangement is that it allows the electrical impulses to spread rapidly through the heart, to stimulate the cardiac muscle cells to contract simultaneously. That means all together at once and uniformly. So this is unlike the skeletal muscle cells that do not have these connections. All right, that's how we differentiate the cardiac muscle from the skeletal muscle. The cardiac muscle has these connections between each other. Now, the second characteristic of cardiac muscles is that they are myogenic. The word myo means muscle. So when we say they're myogenic, it means that the cardiac muscles in the heart, they can contract and relax on their own without receiving any impulse signal, any stimulation from the nervous system. So if you compare them to the skeletal muscles, the cardiac muscles compared to the skeletal muscles. Now, skeletal muscles need the stimulation, need the impulse from the nervous system to stimulate them so that they will contract. Without the impulse from the nervous system, the skeletal muscle will not contract. But for cardiac muscles, they do not need to receive any impulse from the nervous system, because within the heart there are specialized cardiac muscle tissue called the SINOATRIal node, which can generate its own impulse for the heart to contract. Okay, so that's why cardiac muscles are myogenic. The heart can contract and relax on its own without receiving any impulse signal from the nervous system. So to prove that they are myogenic, if we have isolated a heart, all right, and you store the heart, the cardiac muscles or the heart, in a warm oxygenated solution that contains nutrients. So with the oxygen and the nutrients, the muscle cells will survive for some time, and the muscles will contract and relax rhythmically on their own. So this proves that they are the cardiac muscles are myogenic. Now let's try this question. A student dissected a frog that was recently caught and observed that the heart was still beating even after it was dead. Explain this observation. 4 marks. So you can try to apply your knowledge, what you've learned just now, and pause the video for a while and try the question. Right, let's look at the answer. So the heart was still beating even after it was dead. Okay, so after it was dissected, it's still beating. Now, the reason why the heart is still beating or was still beating is that the cardiac muscles of the frog's heart are myogenic, just like for the human heart. Thus, the heart can contract and relax on its own without receiving any impulse signal from the nervous system. So inside the heart, there is a group of cells that can still generate the electrical impulse to cause the heart to beat. So anyway, the nervous system is already dead. Okay, the frog is dead already. The brain has died also, but the heart can still beat because the cells are still alive. The cells that are called the pacemaker, okay, in the heart is still generating the electrical impulses to stimulate the cardiac muscles to contract. All right. So we do not know the scientific name for the pacemaker in the frog. It's different from that of humans. Okay, it's not the SINOATRIAL node, which we will study later. But we just call it the pacemaker. The natural pacemaker in the heart is still generating its own electrical impulses. So each point is 1 mark here. In the previous video, you have already studied the structure of the heart. So let's do a quick revision here. Now there are 3 blood vessels here. The first one on the left is the vena cava, and then this is the aorta that's N-shaped, and then you have the pulmonary artery that's Y-shaped. And then beside there are 2 other blood vessels, which are the pulmonary veins. Okay, then the heart is divided into 4 chambers. So this side is the right side, so right atrium and right ventricle. And on the left side, you have the left atrium and the left ventricle. So think of this word relax. Okay, running across, imagine it's written across a picture of the heart. So RI is for the right side and LE is for the left side. Then the valves. In the pulmonary artery, we have the semilunar valve, and also in the aorta. Okay, there are also semilunar. There's a semilunar valve. And then the tricuspid valve is found on the right side of the heart, and the bicuspid valve on the left side of the heart to prevent backflow of blood from ventricles into atria. Then the center part here, we have the septum, which divides the heart into the right and left side. So this is a realistic looking heart. And here we can see the various parts, identify the various parts or structures in the heart. So this blood vessel here is the vena cava, then you have the aorta, and this is the pulmonary artery. And these 2 are the right atrium and the left atrium here. Then we have the valves. So this is the semilunar valve, this is the tricuspid valve, this is the bicuspid valve. And the lower part here are the 2 ventricles, right ventricle and left ventricle. And then the center here is the wall, dividing wall called the septum. Then finally, we have the bundle of His, which are the fibers that can help to conduct electrical impulses, okay, through the septum. And bundle of His is joined to the Purkinje fibers that are found in the walls of the 2 ventricles. So Purkinje fibers also help to conduct electrical impulses in the heart, which finally cause the ventricles to contract. So we'll find out more about this as we go along. Let's now find out about the cardiac cycle, which is the sequence of events that occur when the heart beats once, right? So in one heartbeat, you have a relaxation phase, then contraction of atria, and then contraction of ventricles. Relaxation, contraction of atria, then contraction of ventricles. Okay, so cardiac cycle is a sequence of events that occur when the heart beats, and there are 3 stages in the cardiac cycle. So in the relaxation phase is also called the diastole phase. This word is pronounced diastole. The LE is pronounced at the end. Okay. So in this phase, the atria and the ventricles relax. Good. Okay, that means all the heart chambers take a rest. They cannot be contracted all the time. Okay. So they must rest for a while, and it's only a very short phase of less than 0.5 seconds, less than 0.5 seconds. Then the blood flows into the atria and ventricles when the whole heart is relaxed. Because when it's relaxed, the volume is bigger and the blood pressure inside is lower. Then the blood from other parts, from the veins, tend to flow into the heart. Then in the atrial systole phase, now this word is pronounced systole, as you can see here, systole, not systole. So this is following. You can check up with in YouTube and also Google, okay, how to pronounce these two words, diastole and systole. So in the atrial systole phase, the atria contract. We say atrial means atria, systole means contraction. So in the atrial systole phase, atria contract together. The two atria, the right atria and the left atria, contract together to pump blood to the two ventricles below. Okay. Then the last phase is called the ventricular systole phase. Is when the ventricles now contract. Okay, so ventricles don't contract in the second stage together with atrium, with the atria. They contract after the atria have contracted. Alright, so in the ventricular systole phase, ventricles now get their turn to contract, and this will pump the blood out of the arteries to the rest of the body. Okay, so there are three main phases. So the word diastole means relaxation of the heart or cardiac muscles. For example, in the first phase here, diastole, the whole heart relaxes. So think of the word diastole, think of the word dilate. Dilate means to expand. So systole is a contraction of the heart or cardiac muscles. Think of the word for S, systole, think of the word shrink or smaller. So it becomes smaller in size. Okay, the chamber that contracts will become smaller in size, but the blood pressure inside will increase. Now let's talk about the cardiac cycle in more detail. The whole cycle is 0.8 seconds long, not even 1 second. And on the right hand side here, we see the summary from the previous slide. First, there's relaxation of all the heart chambers. Secondly, atria contract. And lastly, ventricles contract. So the acronym is RAV, for the cardiac cycle. Now let's start with the relaxation of the heart chambers. This is also called diastole, and it's 0.4 seconds long. So two atria and two ventricles relax. Blood flows from veins into atria. Okay, because when the whole heart relaxes, the blood pressure inside is lower, since the volume or the volume of the heart is bigger, right? Since it's in a relaxed phase. So blood pressure is lower, and then blood will flow in to fill the atria. Blood flows in from the vena cava into the right atrium and from the pulmonary veins into the left atrium. And then some blood will also flow down into the ventricles. Okay, so the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are open, but the semilunar valves are closed. Why? So they are closed because the blood pressure in the ventricles is lower when they are relaxing, and blood tends to flow down, okay, into the ventricles from the pulmonary artery and the aorta. This is when the semilunar valves will close. So we hear the dub sound when the semilunar valves close. Next comes the contraction of the two atria. We call that atrial systole, and it's very fast. It's only 0.1 second. Okay, so the two atria contract, whereas the two ventricles relax. Okay, so when the atria contract, the ventricles must relax, and vice versa, so that there is a system of blood flow. If if atria and ventricles contract together, then where's the blood going to go? It'll all spurt into the arteries in all directions. So the two atria contract, but the two ventricles relax. So in that way, the blood from the atria are pumped into the two ventricles below. So the tricuspid and bicuspid valves are opened, but the semilunar valves remain shut or closed as in the first phase. Next is ventricular systole or contraction of ventricles. And the time for it is 0.3 seconds only. So the two atria now relax. After the contraction, they relax. It's now the ventricles turn to contract. So two ventricles contract, okay, as shown by the blue arrows. Yellow arrows here show relaxation of the heart chambers. So when the two ventricles contract, the blood will be pumped from ventricles into the arteries, into the pulmonary artery and the aorta. But some blood tends to flow back. May tend to flow back into the atria. This is when the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve close. Okay. Then you hear one sound is the LUB sound. LUB sound first, and then is the DUB sound. Okay. So semilunar valves are opened because there's a flow of blood out from the ventricles into the pulmonary artery and aorta. So the valves are open. So take note that after this phase occurs, it's back again to diastole, then atrial systole, and then ventricular systole, and then back again to diastole. So it's a cycle, right? Then you can hear the LUB DUB sound. The first sound is LUB, is when the tricuspid and bicuspid valve close, and then the ventricles are contracting, right? Now at the end of the contraction of ventricles, there will be relaxation of the ventricles. That's when, after the LUB sound, you go back to the beginning, you get the DUB sound. Okay, when the semilunar valves close. So we'll talk more about the sound made by the heart later on. Here is a fun exercise for you to try, an interesting exercise. Looking at this video of the beating heart, can you identify the three stages of the cardiac cycle? Now the first stage is called diastole, or relaxation of all the heart chambers, okay, the atria and ventricles. And when the whole heart is relaxing, blood tends to flow back, okay, into the ventricles. So the semilunar valves will close. That is our sign that it is diastole. Close, like this. 1, 1, 1. Okay, this is number 1, stage 1. Now for the second phase, atrial systole, atria contracts. The atria contract to pump the blood into the ventricles. So at this stage, the tricuspid valve will open here, and the bicuspid valve will open. Okay, let's identify this phase. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay, and for ventricular systole, it's the phase when the ventricles contract to pump the blood out of the heart. Okay, so at this stage, the semilunar valves will open, but the tricuspid valve and bicuspid valve close to prevent backflow of blood into the atria. Okay, so I'm going to look for the sign when the tricuspid valve closes, and that's number 3. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. Okay, so now I'm going to combine 1, 2, 3 to identify the 3 stages at once for one cardiac cycle. Okay, it's going to be very fast, especially from number 2 to 3, because atrial systole is only 0.1 second. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we come to the most important part of this topic, which is the heartbeat mechanism. Now we've already studied the cardiac cycle, which are the stages of contraction of the chambers of the heart. But what is it that really stimulates the contraction of the heart? Okay, so the contraction of the heart is initiated or coordinated by the SINOATRIAL node, S, A, and N, which is the main natural pacemaker, the SAN, right? But in exam, please write out the full name. So the SINOATRIAL node is actually a group of cells, of specialized heart muscle cells, okay, this green spot here, located in the right atrium wall near the vena cava, that initiates or starts the heartbeat. It will generate electrical impulses, all right, that spread to the atria and cause the atria to contract. So initiates the heartbeat. Then after the atria contract, the impulse will move down to through the septum and then to the ventricles, and then the ventricles will contract. Okay, so in that way it sets or initiates the heartbeat and sets the rate or the pace at which the heart contracts. That's why it's called the pacemaker. Okay, you may be asked, why is the sinoatrial node called the pacemaker? Because it generates electrical impulses, all right, that spread rapidly to the atria first, causing the atria to contract, and then to the ventricles, causing the ventricles to contract too. So it is known as the pacemaker because depending on the number of electrical impulses that it produces per minute, it will determine the rate of the heartbeat. If it produces 70 impulses per minute, then the heart will beat 70 times per minute. Okay, so each time it sends out the one electrical impulse, okay, a wave of electrical impulses, then there's one heartbeat, contraction of the atria and then contraction of the ventricles. Right, so but apart from the sinoatrial node, there are 3 more tissues involved in the heartbeat mechanism, which helps to coordinate the contraction of the heart muscles. Okay, so apart from the sinoatrial node, we have the atrioventricular node, which is called the secondary pacemaker, right? Sinoatrial node is the primary or main pacemaker, and then the atrioventricular node is sometimes called the secondary pacemaker. Now, this is not mentioned in the book, but why is it called the secondary pacemaker? In case the sinoatrial node fails to function, the atrioventricular node can help to generate the impulses, right? But it is a bit different. The effect is a bit different from the sinoatrial node, right? So then from the atrioventricular node, there are more tissues or fibers. The third one is the bundle of His. Okay, this tissue here in the septum is the bundle of His. Now, the atrioventricular node is also in the septum, but it's higher up, and it is near the junction of the right atrium and the right ventricle, somewhere near to the tricuspid valve here, right? So atrioventricular node in the septum, and then it will cause the impulse to flow down to the bundle of His here, and then the bundle of His has 2 branches. Okay, so the impulse will flow to both the right side of the heart and to the left side of the heart. Okay, then the bundle of His is connected to these fibers here called the Purkinje fibers, named after the person who discovered it, the Purkinje fibers, and also here, right? So Purkinje fibers are on the walls of in the right ventricle and also in the left ventricle. So when the impulses reach the Purkinje fibers, then the ventricles will contract together. So let's find out more about how the human heartbeat mechanism occurs. Now here's an important question on the heartbeat mechanism or mechanism of heartbeat for new SPM essay question. Describe the human heartbeat mechanism that involves these tissues. Sinoatrial node as the pacemaker, atrioventricular node, bundle of His, and Purkinje fibers, right? So 8 marks. Let's see how we can answer this question. By the way, the word bundle of His, His is actually the name of the German cardiologist who discovered these fibers, the bundle of His. So the cardiac muscle fibers, the bundle of His, is named after its discoverer, German cardiologist Wilhelm His. All right. Now let us answer the question, how to explain or describe the heartbeat mechanism, which involves the 4 tissues that we have listed just now. Okay. Now the first one is the sinoatrial node. What is the role of the sinoatrial node? So to begin the heartbeat, the sinoatrial node or SAN must generate one electrical impulse. All right. So it generates electrical impulse that spread to the 2 atria, right? So in the second diagram here, we see that the impulse is spread to the left atria and also is in the right atria. So electrical impulses spread rapidly in the 2 atria, and both atria will contract simultaneously. That means contract at once. So this is shown by the yellow shaded part here to show you that the electrical impulse have spread to both atria, and there is contraction of the atria, okay, because the atria are stimulated to contract due to the presence of electrical impulses. And when it contracts, you pump the blood. The atria, both atria will pump the blood into the ventricles. Next, what happens to the impulse? So the impulse then flows to the atrioventricular node, this small little dot here, and it will spread down the bundle of His. So these are the two branches of the bundle of His, and after that it will spread to the Purkinje fibres, which are in the walls of the ventricles, up the apex of the heart, up the apex of the heart. The apex is the tip of the heart here. So the impulses will flow upwards via the Purkinje fibres. And lastly, electrical impulses spread through Purkinje fibres from the apex of the heart to the whole ventricle wall. That means the left and right ventricles. And the ventricles will both contract simultaneously, that means contract together, to pump blood out of the heart through the pulmonary artery and the aorta, out to the lungs and the whole body. Alright, so here we can see the four tissues involved. Sinoatrial node is the one that generates the electrical impulse. AVN receives the impulse from SAN, the sinoatrial node. So AVN is the atrioventricular node, and then it will pass the impulse to the bundle of His, and finally to the Purkinje fibers, which move up the walls of the ventricle and cause the ventricles to contract. Here is the answer to the question. Describe the human heartbeat mechanism that involves these tissues: sinoatrial node, atrioventricular node, bundle of His, and Purkinje fibers. Okay, so I've typed in the answer, one whole answer for you here, and each tick is 1 mark, okay, including a tick for Purkinje fibers, and this one a tick for bundle of His here. So altogether is 8 marks. So it's the same as what I've discussed just now. So please go through it, read through it, and also copy down these smart notes into your book, into your notebook. Look at this animation of the heartbeat mechanism. Firstly, the sinoatrial node, SAN, will generate an impulse that flows or spreads to the left atrium and also to the right atrium. So both atria will contract together. So they'll move inwards. Next, the impulse travels to the AVN, the atrioventricular node. And from there, it travels down the bundle of His and up the Purkinje fibers on the left side of the heart here, and also on the right side. Okay, that means to the left ventricle and to the right ventricle wall, to the two walls. So these two flow of impulses occur simultaneously together, right? To the right ventricle and to the left ventricle. And this will cause the ventricles to contract. Alright? So generally the sinoatrial node directly causes the contraction of the right and left atria. And then after that, the atrioventricular node, the bundle of His, and the Purkinje fibers are involved to transmit or conduct the impulses to the ventricles, to cause the ventricles to contract. So we have finished discussing the heartbeat mechanism, and here's a memory tip for you to remember the four tissues involved in the heartbeat mechanism, or the mechanism of heartbeat. Think of sabun, Purkinje. S is for sinoatrial node, A is for atrioventricular node, BUN, the bun here is the bundle of His, and Purkinje is actually a play on the words Purkinje. Now, actually Purkinje is the one who discovered, the person who discovered the Purkinje fibers. Okay, so who is Purkinje in this acronym? He is an uncle who sells soap. online. He is an entrepreneur. He makes his own soap to sell online. Okay, so his brand of soap is called Sabun Purkinje. Okay, so this is the story behind the acronym. Right, so I hope you remember to use this acronym to remember the 4 tissues involved in the mechanism of heartbeat. And you can write it down on a piece of paper, stick it on a wall, and keep reviewing it on and off. After some time, it will stick. All right, you'll be able to remember it well. So here's a summary of the heartbeat mechanism, which can help you to remember the different events that occur in the heartbeat mechanism. All right. SINOATRIAL node, SAN, produces impulse that spreads to the walls of the atria. Then the 2 atria contract. Then the impulse spreads to the atrioventricular node, AVN, and to the bundle of His and the Purkinje fibres, which are found in the walls of the ventricles. So the 2 ventricles then contract. Okay. Now, if the natural pacemaker, the SINOATRIAL node, cannot function well or produces impulses too slowly, an artificial pacemaker is connected to the heart. So this artificial pacemaker generates electrical impulses to stimulate the contraction of the heart and start the heartbeat. So basically, the artificial pacemaker takes over the role of the natural pacemaker. Now, the textbook just mentioned something about electrocardiogram. So let's find out what it is. So the electrical impulses in the heart, okay, that are conducted by the SINOATRIAL node, atrioventricular node, and so forth, can be detected by putting electrodes on the skin. As you can see on this man, electrodes are put on the skin to record an electrocardiogram. All right. So the whole equipment is actually connected to a computer and also to a screen that will show the pattern, okay, here of the, actually it's a graph of the voltage against time for the electrical activity in the heart. And electrocardiogram is therefore a recording of the electrical activity that occurs during every heartbeat. Okay, starting with the SINOATRIAL node, and then the electrical impulse will pass to the AVN, atrioventricular node, and to other tissues like the bundle of His and the Purkinje fibres. So an electrocardiogram can be done on a person, especially when they complain of chest pain, dizziness, shortness of breath. So if the doctor suspects there's something wrong with the heart, the electrocardiogram can be done, and from the pattern of the graph here, they'll be able to detect any irregular heart rhythm, okay, where the heart beats fast and slow and is not following the normal heart rhythm. Also, if there's a slow heartbeat, and then may be able to detect signs of heart disease or heart defects, coronary artery disease, heart valve disease, and also the risk of heart attack. All can be analyzed from the electrocardiogram. But apart from that, there are other tests that the doctor will run to confirm, all right, apart from the electrocardiogram, to confirm whether there's any heart problem or heart attack. Okay, let's find out what an artificial pacemaker is, as mentioned in the textbook. So an artificial pacemaker is a small device that is inserted and implanted into the chest region here, all right? And the part that has a small electronic circuit is called a pulse generator. The size is like a small egg. And then the wires from it, the leads, will be connected to the chambers of the heart. For example, to the atria, to the atrium, right atrium, especially right atrium, or right ventricle, or both together. And also there may be a third lead going to the left ventricle. So if it's only connected, if there's only one lead going to the right atrium, then it's called a single chamber pacemaker. If there are 2 chambers involved, then it's a dual chamber pacemaker, right? And so forth. So the wires or the leads will run through the subclavian vein, and then it will be attached to the chambers of the heart, like the right atrium or the right ventricle, right? Then what does it do? So this pulse generator will generate electrical impulses to stimulate the atria to contract and also to stimulate the ventricles to contract, depending on the problem that's faced by the person. All right. So in that way, they help to control the heartbeat so that it is at a normal, regular pace, okay, normal, regular heartbeat, in case the person has irregular heartbeat or slow heartbeat. So here are some questions about the artificial pacemaker. What is an artificial pacemaker? It is a small device implanted into the chest, to help control and correct the heartbeat, all right? Especially when a person has an irregular heartbeat or slow heartbeat. If the SINOATRIAL node is too slow, right? Then explain how the artificial pacemaker works. So it will generate the electrical impulses delivered by electrodes to the chambers of the heart. For example, the left atrium, the right atrium, or ventricles, or the right ventricle, and so forth, to stimulate the muscles of the atria and the ventricles to contract. So it does the job of the sinoatrial node in a way, right? And as a result, the heart will pump blood to the whole body when the muscles contract. Thus, it can help to maintain a normal, healthy heartbeat rate for the person. And the electrical impulse will first spread to both atria to cause the contraction of atria, and finally, it will move to the impulse will spread to the atrioventricular node, which will transmit the impulse to the two ventricles to cause the contraction of ventricles. So it's similar to the function of the sinoatrial node, and the contractions are similar to the one that a normal person will experience. So when is it used? It is used to correct an irregular or slow heartbeat if the sinoatrial node is too slow, caused by aging, heart muscle damage from heart attack, or inherited, okay, it's genetically linked. So it will help to treat heart failure in a person. So now let's discuss the sounds of the heart. So if you have a stethoscope and you put it on the chest of a person where the heart is, you will hear a sound like this. Doop, 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 like this, okay? Or LUB DUB, LUB DUB, LUB DUB. So what is the LUB DUB sound made by the heart? It is actually the sound of the heart valves closing, meaning the tricuspid and bicuspid valve for LUB and the semilunar valves for the DUB sound. Okay, so the first LUB sound is produced when the tricuspid valve and the bicuspid valve close at the beginning of the contraction of ventricles or ventricular systole. Okay, so if you look at the cardiac cycle again, we have R for relaxation, A for atrial contraction, and then V for ventricular contraction or systole. For the first loop, it happens when tricuspid and bicuspid valve close during ventricular contraction or systole to prevent the backflow of blood from ventricles into atria, right? So when the two valves shut to prevent the backflow of blood, there is the LUB sound, right? So here, you see the arrow here is pointing to the start of the contraction of ventricles. Okay, that's when the LUB occurs. Then the ventricles will contract. After the ventricles have contracted, they start to relax. Okay, that's when we hear the second sound, which is the DUB sound. So the second DUB sound is produced when the semilunar valves in the pulmonary artery and aorta close at the beginning of the relaxation of ventricles or diastole. Okay, so after ventricles have contracted, they will relax together with the atria. So when they relax, blood tends to flow down from the arteries, pulmonary artery and aorta, into the two ventricles. That's when the semilunar valves will shut and there is a DUB sound. Okay, so if you look at the timeline here, the DUB sound occurs right after the ventricles have contracted and they are starting to relax. Then the semilunar valves close and you hear the DUB sound. Alright? So in between the LUB and DUB sound is the contraction of the ventricles. So the LUB DUB sound made by the heart is actually the sound of the heart valves closing. Let's try to imitate the LUB DUB sound based on the beating heart that's shown here. So when you see the tricuspid and bicuspid valve closing, you say LUB. When you see the semilunar valve closing, you say DUB. Okay? So it's going to be quite fast in this case. Okay, let's try it together. LUB DUB, 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 LUB DUB. Right. So that's how the sound of the valves is made or are made, that causes the heartbeat sound. Now I've also included a link below to a medical video which accurately gives us the sound. It records the sound, the accurate sound of the normal heartbeat. Okay, so if the heartbeat sounds differently from the normal heartbeat, it could be caused by some heart problems, right? So we've got to know the exact, accurate normal heartbeat sound. So do click on the link in the description box below for the video, the medical video that records the accurate heartbeat sound. We have already discussed the pumping action of the heart. So let's go on to the second force that helps in the circulation of blood in the body. This is the contraction of skeletal muscles around the veins. Alright? So what is the role of the skeletal muscles? Now, the pumping action of the heart helps in the distribution and flow of blood through arteries, arterioles, and blood capillaries. So let's refer to this picture here. Now, this is the heart, and here we see it's connected to an artery. So this one artery represents all the arteries, okay? And the artery branches to form the branches called the arterioles. Then arterioles branch out further to form the tiny capillaries, okay? So the pumping action of the heart is able to push the blood and help in the blood flow through arteries, arterioles, and capillaries. But when it comes to the venules and the veins, the force produced by the pumping action of the heart is not enough, is insufficient for blood to flow through the veins and return to the heart. Why is that so? It's because when the blood flows through the blood capillaries, which are very tiny, capillaries give a lot of resistance to blood flow because they are tiny and they have a large surface area. So there's friction when the blood flows through the capillaries. Blood has to brush against the walls of the capillaries, and this will slow down the flow of blood. So the blood pressure will also drop tremendously after the blood flows through the capillaries. Alright, and the speed of blood flow is also very much lower. Okay, so the blood pressure in the veins will become very low, and it is not enough to push the blood back to the heart by itself. Okay, furthermore, if we are standing up, the blood in the legs will be forced to flow against the force of gravity back to the heart. So there's difficulty for the blood to flow back to the heart. So how does the blood flow back to the heart? So A, the role of skeletal muscles in blood circulation. How does the blood in veins flow back to the heart? 6 marks. It can be asked as a structure or essay question. Now, blood flow in veins towards the heart is assisted by two factors: contraction of smooth muscles in the venule and vein walls. So in the wall of a vein, there is a layer of smooth muscle somewhere in the center part of the wall. So these smooth muscles can contract. When they contract, they will decrease the volume of the vein, they make it smaller, but it will increase the blood pressure in the vein, right? So the blood will be squeezed and it will be pushed back towards the heart, back to the heart. Then the valves will prevent the backflow of blood. Now, another important factor is the contraction of skeletal muscles, other than the smooth muscles. The contraction of skeletal muscles that are found around the veins, not inside the veins. Okay, the smooth muscles are in the veins, but the skeletal muscles are around the veins. For example, you can see here, these two muscles of the leg, there's a vein here in between. So during movement of body parts like the legs, for example, if someone were to stand on tiptoe or walk, then the skeletal muscles will have to contract to move the body parts. When they contract, they will bulge outwards and inwards, and they will press on the veins. So they will constrict the veins, meaning they will make the veins narrower, like this, right? So the blood pressure inside the veins will increase, and the blood will start to move. So it will move and force the valves open in this direction towards the heart. So it allows the blood to flow back to the heart. However, if the blood tries to flow in the opposite direction, the valve below will close to prevent the backflow of blood down towards the foot. Okay? So in this way, the valve will ensure the one-way flow of blood in the direction of the heart, back to the heart. Right, so this diagram shows you the condition before and after there's movement. Now, before movement occurs, if there's no movement, the leg muscles are relaxed. So they do not bulge outwards and they are narrower, and they do not press the vein. Alright, so gravity may pull the blood, the pull of gravity may pull the blood downwards, so the valves are functioning and they will close to prevent the backflow of blood. Now, when we contract our muscles during movement, then the muscles will bulge outwards and press against the vein. So the vein becomes constricted, and then this will increase the blood pressure inside, so the blood will flow. So the blood can flow upwards because the valve will open as the blood flows upwards. But when the blood tries to flow backwards, the backflow of blood is prevented by the valve that closes below. Okay, so in this way, the blood moves back towards the heart, back to the heart. Right, let's discuss the formation of varicose veins. Let's look at this question. Explain what can happen to the valves and veins in a person's leg if he constantly stands or sits for too long. So if a person stands or sits for too long, for hours, for example, there's less contraction of the leg skeletal muscles. Okay, so when the muscles don't contract that much, they don't squeeze the veins and they don't help to push the blood back to the heart. So less blood in the veins is pushed back to the heart. Now, over time, prolonged standing for hours and the downward force of gravity causes the blood to pool or accumulate in the leg veins here. Okay, instead of flowing back to the heart, most of the blood may accumulate in the veins. So the high pressure of the blood in the veins can damage the valves. Okay, so the valves are pressed downwards and then they are damaged. They are no longer sort of tight anymore, and they can open up in this way. So the damaged valves cannot prevent the backflow of blood into the lower leg anymore. So there's backflow of blood in the lower leg, and the build-up of blood in the vein can cause the vein to become swollen and bulge outwards on the skin, okay, under the skin. So this causes the varicose vein. So varicose veins are just swollen, bulging veins, usually on the calf, on the feet, or on the legs, okay, on the legs. Now, in Chinese we call this 静脉曲张, and in Malay it's called vena varicose. So varicose veins often occur in hawkers, nurses, and teachers who experience prolonged standing when they are carrying out when they are doing their work. Okay, and one way to correct this or to prevent this is to, once the person goes back home to rest, he must put his legs higher up than the rest of the body, so that the blood can flow back to the heart more easily. Let's very quickly discuss formative exercise 10.3. State the names of these tissues in the heart, the main pacemaker of the heart and the secondary pacemaker. What does the term myogenic mean? So we can pause the video for a while, and then after that we can discuss the answers. Right, let's see the answers. The main pacemaker of the heart is the SINOATRIAL node. Now, secondary pacemaker is not mentioned in the textbook, but it is the atrioventricular node. The word myogenic means the heart contracts and relaxes on its own without receiving any impulse signal from the nervous system. And there are specialized cardiac muscles called the sinoatrial node in the human body, in the heart of the human body, to generate and transmit the impulses for contraction and relaxation of the cardiac muscles of the heart. So that's why it does not need any impulse signal from the nervous system.